First of all, Mr. Talmadge,
Thorpe.
Mr. Thorpe, excuse me. First of all, Mr. Thorpe, on behalf of the Oneida County History Center and the Tug Hill Commission, thank you for being with us today. We're excited to hear what you have to say about the CCC and your involvement in that.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So where were you born and when?
Oh,
You can
my
scare
goodness.
us now.
You go a long way back. I was born in Manhattan, actually, New York City. And at the age of 2, I moved to Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. I consider myself a Brooklynite.
There you go.
That's where I'm from.
So was your employment affected by the Great Depression? Like immediately, did you feel any impact of what was going on?
We were poor, so.
You were poor.
My father worked all the time. He was a taxi driver.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually worked nights, and he was home, came home, and slept during the day. And of course, I didn't see that much of him because I had to go to school during the day, and I would, most of the time I was in school. From kindergarten to high school in Brooklyn, New York. Mm. And I walked every step of the way.
Did you?
From kindergarten to high school. We didn't have buses in those days.
Right. Really? So how did you get involved with the CCC?
Well, when I graduated from high school in 1940, June of 1940, I worked that summer after I graduated, odd jobs, and didn't think it was going anywhere. And I saw an announcement in the newspaper for people to enroll in what they call the CCC program. And I read a little bit about it, and I said, well, maybe that's something that I might do to get away from being wandering around the streets in Brooklyn. Mm. And I got an application, filled it out, and applied to become a member of the CCC program. I was accepted.
Right.
And they sent me tickets and not much else. And told me where I had to go.
Mm-hmm. What tickets on the train?
On the train tickets, yes. Yeah. And traveled by train from Brooklyn. Actually left from downtown Brooklyn. I don't know if you've heard of the Brooklyn Nets. Mm.
Baseball?
The train station was right across the street from where the Brooklyn Nets Stadium is right now.
Okay.
Long Island Railroad. And we took that train from Brooklyn to where the campsite was located near Elmira, New York. So we traveled upstate through the lower part of New York State up to Binghamton, and then from Binghamton up to Elmira. Mm-hmm. And we were met at, I think I was the only one, as I recall, at that time coming that way. And they picked us up in a truck at Elmira and drove us to the camp, which was not far from Elmira, in a little town called Van Etten, New York, which is a very small farm village.
So was that like where their orientation was going on?
Yes.
Right.
That's where everything began and ended.
How long were you there?
I was there. I arrived in the fall of 1940, and I stayed in Van Etten for about a year. And they were going to start closing some of the CCC camps. So the following year, fall of the following year, those of us at Van Etten were sent to different camps. And I was sent to a camp at Empeyville.
The big metropolis of Empeyville,
New York. The big metropolis of Empeyville, which was Empeyville.
So when
familiar with what Empeyville looks like?
When was that?
It's nothing but woods.
When did you get to Empeyville?
Probably about October of 1941. October, November, as I recall.
Did the
something like that. I wasn't there very long though.
Did the camp have any nicknames? Did you guys call it
Not
anything?
that I know
No.
of. I wasn't there. And they already had campers already were there at Empeyville. I don't know if you know anything about the CCC program, but it was instituted by President Roosevelt during the Depression, during the Great Depression, during the 30s.
Right.
And it was a national organization that he set up camps across the country to get young kids off the streets and into some kind of a...
That's great. Did any of your friends
Viable.
enroll, or were you kind of on your own?
I was on my own.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're on your own, believe me. You gotta learn fast.
So how did you get actually to the camp in Empeyville?
A truck.
Oh,
Yeah, trucks.
no, move you over.
They had the old-fashioned Chevrolet stake trucks on the side of the canvas over the top, benches on the side. You jumped in the back and sat on the bench, and they drove you to where you had to go.
So you're from the New York City area,
Yes.
and you ended up way out in
the middle of nowhere.
What did you think of being out there?
Say, what am I doing here?
A lot of stars.
City boy in the country. And it was a strange, strange thing to come from a city and to be in the country. City, you have street lights, where in the country there's no lights.
It's scary.
Yep.
Yeah, in a way.
It is different.
So what type of work did you have you doing at the camp in Empeyville?
Well, of course, you had the orientation, which probably, it didn't take more than probably a week or so. Give you clothes to wear, uniforms, shoes, complete outfit. And we were assigned to what they call work groups. The work groups were, they were assigned to local farmers through the New York State, what they call it, Agriculture Department or whatever.
Okay.
Farmers would go to the state, said they needed help doing so and so. And the state would say, well, we got a camp of young men, boys, they call them then, that you can, use. And we have young men who are studying things like agriculture and things like that, and they would work with the farmer, find out what the farmer needed, and then they would tell the people at the camp what they had, young CCC boys would have to do. And we would go out, and the farmer had, he had ditches to be dug, and he had plants to be planted, things to be planted that he needed help with. And we went out and did that kind of work. Dug a hole in the ground and stuck a shoot in the hole and covered it over. And moved
Planting
to the next
trees?
one. Planted trees. And dug ditches and things like that. Yeah.
So we had some graphic information that the folks brought along, and it listed sort of the daily schedule of the camp, and I was wondering if you had any insight. It said that they got you up at 6 o'clock in the morning with reveille. Was that really like a...
Yep. The camps were run by the Army. So the Army, they did it the Army way. The camp that I was in Manhattan, was run by I don't know where he was. He was a civilian, I think, yeah. G.I. Howard, his name was George I. Howard. I remember him. And he worked for the state, New York State, of course. And, but the Army young men, the corporals, well, there weren't that many, really. They would tell him, how to line everybody up for drill and take attendance and all of that. So he would take care of all that. and he worked out of what they call a camp office. If you knew anything about the Army worked under strict segregationist rules. So the camps were not integrated.
Oh,
The camp that I was in was segregated camp, African American, except for the leadership. The leadership of all of those camps were all white.
gotcha.
So we got our instructions from our camp leaders, our camp guidance counselors, and they would tell us where to go, what march us off to get us into the truck, and the truck would drive us out to the farm.
About how many men total were at the camp?
Well, the camp that I was in was there were 5 we call them barracks,
Yep.
Army barracks they were, and each barrack held about 20.
Oh,
So there were maybe a little less than 20. So the camp personnel, I mean, that is the camp CCers or CC boys, there were about 100 to each barrack, and 5 of those, so about 100. I said 100, no, about 10 to each barrack, I said.
Okay.
And there was about 20, 10, 5, 10, 20. So there were about 100, between 80 and 100 young men in the camp total.
yeah.
But then they had other buildings. They had a mess building. They had a supply building. They had a building that served as a main office where the director sat, and his staff sat in that office. And he had people work in his office with him. He would tell them what forms to make out, and they would do that with the old-fashioned typewriters.
Yeah, right. The words go right on the paper. It's like magic.
You had to pound on the keys.
So carrying on in the day, at 6:30 was breakfast, a sick call, and policing of the site. How was breakfast?
Well, so something to eat.
Not high marks
They
there?
marched it to the mess hall, yeah, and the mess hall had the long, like I don't know if you've been to some of the state parks. Those picnic tables that you see.
Yeah.
The picnic table with the 2 seats on one side and seat on the other, and the table. That was what the mess hall was like. So you sat on the bench, and the cook and his crew would come and put stuff on the table, and he'd have a tin plate, and you take stuff out of the plate and put it on your out of the main tray and put it on your plate.
And they were able to feed everybody all in one batch?
Yeah, all at once. Yes, everybody all ate at once. Lunch, well, lunch was something else, because after your breakfast, they gave you a brown paper bag, which had a sandwich and a piece of fruit, and that was about it, really. Anything to drink, you had to get out at the work site. They had these big galvanized cans where they had Kool-Aid. If you heard of Kool-Aid, that was it. You dip it out with a dipper and fill up your cup, and you drank out of that.
So after you had breakfast and stuff, you'd get your assignment for the day?
You did your assignment for the day until lunchtime, and then you had lunch. Broke for lunch for about a half an hour to an hour, and you went back to work again, and you worked for another 3 or 4 hours, and work ended, and you got back on your truck, and the truck drove you back to the camp.
So you were working for farmers, essentially, it sounded
Essentially.
like. Did you have to bring your own tools, or did they provide what
They
you...
provided the tools. Yeah, they provided the tools. Showed you how to use them. Picks, and shovels, and rakes, things like that. Yeah. Sledgehammers to break the stones up.
So, apart from the the work day and the meals, not that you had a lot, but what was there like spare time at camp? What else did you do?
After work was over, you were back to your barracks, and then you had spare time until they blew the thing for, well, of course, after you got back to camp, sometime part of that evening, you had to go to dinner, of course, to the mess hall again for dinner. And after dinner, then you had spare time. And spare time is when you got to meet everybody in the camp. And you had to be careful who you met.
Oh, really? What type of things did you run into?
There were guys that they came from all over, like New York, the camp that I was in. Most of the young men came from Harlem and Brooklyn and Buffalo and Albany. And they were, well, we used to call them city slickers. And I didn't grow up in that kind of a neighborhood, so I had to be careful with the city slickers. Would find ways to get whatever you had that they wanted.
Do you think they got sent there by their family, or did they go there on their own?
They got there most likely on their own. So the camps were run by, like I say, by the Army, but they would choose some of the older campers to be supervisors, or what they call barrack leaders. Each barrack rather had a barrack leader, and he was a little older. He's probably 3 or 4 years older than the general camper, and he would tell them, where they had to go, how to line up for the trucks. He would have them stand in line, and he would assign them duties that they had to do in their spare time while they're in the barracks. He would tell them what the things they had to do. Some of us had to take care of the old belly stoves. I don't know if you remember those.
Yep.
With
What season were
coal.
What season were you there?
What?
You weren't there long. What seasons? Was it middle of summer?
Through the winter, actually.
Were you?
I was there. I arrived at Van Etten, and my phone's ringing. That's somebody. I was there in the winter of 1940. Yeah, I left there. Van Etten, I left in the winter of 41. I went to Empeyville, from Van Etten to Empeyville. I was there for the winter of Empeyville, and from Empeyville, I was sent from Empeyville to a campsite in Beltsville, Maryland. But the thing that I took advantage of while I was at both Van Etten and Empeyville was that I had taken office classes in high school, so I knew how to type. I could use a typewriter,
Right.
so I got to work in the office.
Skills. Nice.
After I figured out how to get out of going out on the field.
Oh, so you didn't want to necessarily work with the farmers. You stayed in the office.
Not necessarily, because it's hard work.
That's smart.
And so I would do I type the records and keep track of when they took attendance. I would type up the records for attendance, things like that. Who said present, who said no.
Sure.
And you had to make sure that if you were well enough to get up, you had to be present. And you had to say so. And the barracks leader had to verify that you were there. He had to verify that to the camp superintendent. That's how they kept track of who was there and who wasn't.
So, Empeyville is one of the snowier areas in the country.
Absolutely.
What did you think of the weather while you were up there?
Absolutely. I never saw so much snow in my life. Because when I was at Empeyville, we would travel from Empeyville, which is just outside of Camden, actually. Yeah. From Camden to Rome, New York, to go to the movies. And we traveled out I don't know what highway it was, but the snow was like 8 and 10 feet snowbanks. I couldn't believe that they had that much snow. and go to the movie. After the movie, they drive you back to the camp.
So would that have been like during the week or on the weekend?
On the weekend.
When we had more
Oh
time.
yeah, you're working.
Right.
Not during the week.
So did you get to visit Camden while you were in Empeyville?
Not really.
No, you went to Rome.
Right to Rome. Right. Yeah. Rome. I think we even went to Utica. We even came to Utica once to go to the movie. There were a couple movies on Genesee Street, the old time movies. I can't remember which one.
That's quite a trip in the winter.
Oh yes, an all-day trip, all day up and back. And but the thing I remember about Empeyville was I was there on the morning of December the 7th, 1941, in the office, listening to the radio, and they came on and said that we're going off the air. The president wants to make an announcement, and President Roosevelt came on and announced, "This is my sad duty to announce to the country that the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor." And that's when I heard it.
And you were way out in Empeyville.
And I was in Empeyville, sitting in the office, and I heard that. Yep. And within the week after that, I was sent from Empeyville to Beltsville, Maryland. I was shipped out of Empeyville.
So was it caused by the start of the war, or was it just coinciding?
I'm not sure why it was, what happened to it. I think they were getting ready to shut down a lot of those camps. Like Manhattan was shut down, Empeyville was shut down, and the camps south of New York, like the Beltsville is in Maryland, just south of Washington, D.C., and that was still open, so that's where I was sent. That's where I spent the rest of my life in the CCC camp at Beltsville, Maryland. And at that time, I was assigned to work with in the truck garage, auto garage, I used to call it. And I was trained to do a lot of real automobile work with a very nice gentleman. I can't remember his name, but he taught me all I knew, all I learned about fixing and repairing automobiles back in the old days. You could take things apart and put them back together.